When you hear the word history, what do you imagine? A dusty book full of pages and pages of dates? In our opinion, history is the collection of all the most memorable, most unbelievable, or most fascinating stories humans have ever come to witness, both good and bad. Instead of being a pile of long and dreary texts, we imagine history as an amalgamation of images, which together make up the collective story of humanity. Nothing can illustrate this idea like historical images. Take a peek at these unforgettable 10 photos, and see history from a brand new perspective. Police stopped New York City traffic for a cat and her kitten in 1925. Nearly a century before 2 subway lines were held up for hours to spare a couple of kittens, a police officer stalled traffic on Center Street in downtown Manhattan to let a mother cat and her kitten cross the street. Harry Warnecke, a photographer for the New York News, got a phone tip about a cat trying to carry its kittens home who was tying up traffic, because a policeman had stopped the cars on a busy street to allow it to cross. Warnecke arrived after the event was over, but he convinced the policeman and cat's owner to allow him to recreate the scene. Despite the policeman's initial reluctance, the cat's inclination to cross the street diagonally instead of in front of the cars, and furious honking motorists, Warnecke finally got his shot after 3 attempts. It was the craziest thing that happened that year. Know the famous photo of construction workers having lunch on the half-finished Empire State Building? Here's the photographer who took that photo, Charles Ebbets, 1932. Ebbets' 2 most famous photos were taken during the construction of the Rockefeller Center in New York in 1932. Lunchtime atop a skyscraper depicts 11 men sitting on a girder eating lunch, their feet dangling from the beams hundreds of feet above the New York streets below. Was snapped on September 29, 1932, and appeared in the New York Herald Tribune shortly after. The photo was taken on the 69th floor in the last several months of construction. Men asleep on a girder is a picture of the same workers lying down on the beam taking a nap. Not until 2003 was Charles C. Ebbets officially recognized by the Bettman Archive as the photographer of lunchtime atop a skyscraper, and dozens of other famous Bettman Archive photos which had previously been mismarked or were marked as photographer unknown. His photographs were featured in the Miami Daily News, the New York Times, National Geographic, Outdoors Unlimited, Field and Stream, Popular Boating, U.S., Camera, Outdoor Life, Look Magazine, Popular Photography. The June 1938 issue featured a full spread about Ebbets and his work, and many others. The photo, Lunch Atop a Skyscraper, shows 11 construction workers calmly eating lunch, while sitting next to each other on a long steel girder, framed by the city far below them. It is, in many ways, a scary image made scarier by the lack of any sort of safety gear. The photo was taken by Charles C. Ebbets on September 29, 1932 from the 69th floor, during the construction of G Building at Rockefeller Center, and the workers seem remarkably at ease despite the dizzying height. Their ease is what makes this such an amazing photo, especially since several men fell to their deaths in the course of building Rockefeller Center. Ebbets hauled around a heavy 5x7 glass plate camera, and a large case filled with fragile glass photographic plates and holders. This gear must have been extremely dangerous to use in the winds that often roar through a skyscraper frame at that great height. An Italian soldier feeds a local orphan in the year 1993 in Mogadishu, an exceptional example of humanity and generosity. The Battle of Checkpoint Pasta, sometimes called the Battle of the Pasta Factory, was a firefight in Mogadishu between Italian troops and Somali rebels, and is remembered for being the first all-out battle involving the Italian army since the end of the Second World War. Freddie Mercury in his mother's arms in 1947. He's a very interesting mix of cultures. His ancestry is Parsi, his family spoke Gujarati, he was born in Zanzibar, Tanzania, he grew up in Maharashtra, and he spent most of his life in England. Freddie died in 1991, but remains as famous, if not even more so, decades later. His music, of course, lives on, and the movie Bohemian Rhapsody raised the profile of the extraordinary performer and the band Queen for an entirely new generation. His mother, Ja, lived another 25 years after the loss of her son and has spoken powerfully about his pride and pain. In a rare interview in 2012, Ja spoke movingly about finding peace with losing her famous child. She said, "It was a very sad day when he died in November 1991. But according to our religion, when it is the right time, you cannot change it. You have to go. God loved him more and wanted him with him, and that is what I keep in my mind. No mother wants to see her son die, but, at the same time, he has done more for the world in his short life than many people could do in 100 years. The old woman who was given 5 minutes to pack and leave before the Russian army destroyed her home leaves with rugs and a photo of her husband. I am beyond questioning the rationale for war. This picture is so hurting. Totally speechless. Photograph was taken on January 1, 1923 of the last queen consort of Mongolia, Genapil. At some point, Bog decided to get married. It was an unheard of event. This has never happened with any of his previous 7 embodiments. The Khan's chosen one, who received the religious name Don Dogdalam. In 1902 she received the title Mother Dakini of the state and White Tara, and the official title of the wife of Khan Bogd. Don Dogdalam was a very educated woman at that time. She perfectly knew how to read and write and knew the Tibetan language. In her homeland, she was called a master in her land. White Tara initiated the adoption of children from low-income families where they were dying. One of these children later became a famous composer and author of the Mongolian anthem. The mistress died in 1923, having lived in a happy marriage with the Khan for more than 2 decades. But it will not be about her at all, but about a completely different woman, a woman who became, albeit for a short time, was caste according to the canons of Buddhism. The named Syenpil dropped out. The ruler gave her a new name, Genapil. She was designated the next reincarnation of the Don Dogdalam. She did not live a year in marriage with the Khan. He died, and Genapil was sent back to her parents with rich gifts. She remarried. Her chosen one was a former wrestler named Love Sandamba. As a result of this union, 3 children were born, 2 girls and a boy. A submerged diver in 1899. This is believed to be the first underwater photograph ever taken. It's been called the first underwater photograph and the first underwater self-portrait, but it doesn't seem to be either of those things. No, but this photo by diver and photography pioneer Louis Marie Auguste Boutin, taken in 1899, does seem to be the world's first underwater portrait. Accurate details about this photograph are difficult to pin down. Here's what we know for sure: it is not a self-portrait. It is a portrait of Romanian oceanographer and biologist Emil Rakovița, and it was taken by the aforementioned Louis Boutin in Bagnols-sur-Mer in the south of France in 1899. However, if you dig around you'll find a lot of other info as well. Many claim it's a self-portrait that was taken in 1893, that the exposure was 30 minutes long and Boutin suffered nitrogen narcosis as a result, and that it was captured at a, holy crap, depth of 164 feet. We could find no mention of the depth that satisfied us, and the 1893 date seems to be the date Boutin first invented his underwater camera. He took some underwater photos that year, no doubt, but this portrait was more likely taken in 1899 after he developed his crazy underwater flash photography rig. Seeing that his exposures, ironically enough, taken on dry plates, had to run as long as 30 minutes to capture the proper amount of light, Boutin began to develop a flash photography rig that could easily double as a bomb. The creation involved an alcohol lamp on an oxygen-filled barrel. A rubber bulb would then blow a puff of magnesium powder over the flame, creating a flash. From there, Boutin kept iterating his cameras and bombs flash rigs, improving on his initial creation. Operation Baby Lift, a frantic Saigon rescue effort, is echoed in Kabul's chaos. It was early April 1975 in Saigon, the final days of the South Vietnamese collapse in a ruinous war, and crying women were handing orphaned babies to Regina An, a 30-year-old Air Force flight nurse, had just landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base as part of Operation Baby Lift, a mission ordered by President Gerald R. Ford to evacuate thousands of orphans before Saigon fell. It was just total chaos. An took one baby after another onto a military cargo plane, their caretakers wailing as the children disappeared into the fuselage and a new life. The screaming babies, the anguish, it all came back to An watching the chaos unfold at the Kabul airport in Afghanistan, where thousands of Americans and Afghan citizens have boarded planes bound for anywhere but there. April of 1975 was the beginning of the end for America's long and disastrous involvement in the Vietnam War. By the end of the month, the North Vietnamese would take control of Saigon, but in between, the Ford administration launched a series of complicated and often harrowing missions to extract U.S. military members, American citizens, and Vietnamese allies. The first sanctioned mission was Operation Baby Lift, an effort to transport thousands of babies and young children out of Vietnam on dozens of flights. Doctors and other aid workers were sent into the streets of Vietnam looking for orphans. Frederick Skip M. Burkle Jr., a physician who had been a Navy doctor during the war, was one of them. It was really a desperate time in Vietnam, with the small alleyways and all the rest of the stuff going on. Families had been abandoning their children at orphanages hoping they'd be rescued. Mothers give birth in an already overpopulated Manila. More than 65 babies are born at the government-operated Dr. Jose Fabela Memorial Hospital in Manila, Philippines every day. Manila is one of the most densely populated cities in the world, and many of the city dwellers are forced to live on every bit of spare land they can find. Poverty causes people to live under bridges, railway lines, and even cemeteries. Philippines still ban abortions, and women still have to go through these unsafe, illegal abortion procedures. If you thought a speculum from your routine pap smear was painful, then imagine having a catheter inserted in your uterus, or have a painful massage session from a so-called birth attendant. Not as pleasant as it sounds, right? Well, blame that on the Philippines Catholic conservatives saying no to contraceptives and to only use abstinence or practice marital sex. This is why this hospital has been nicknamed the Baby Factory, Because moms have no choice but to share beds with up to 4 women. I cannot even imagine having to give birth to my child in front of countless of strangers. But these women don't have much of a choice. The Fabella Hospital is the cheapest place to give birth, and women living in poverty frequent here and pay whatever they can give. In fact, women from the slums opt to give birth at the Fabella Hospital because they offer free contraception right after giving birth, since contraceptives are costly and disapproved by the government. It seems that women in the Philippines are not able to make their own decisions when it comes to their bodies. What's worse, they are forced to make immoral decisions because contraceptives are seen as abortifacients. A crying man carries his daughter across enemy lines in the Iraqi city of Mosul from territory controlled by Islamic State militants to positions held by Iraqi special forces. The photo was credited to Reuters photographer Goran Tomasevic. Both screaming in terror, the father and the young daughter he cradled in his arm fled through the rubble-strewn streets of Wadi Hajar, transformed in a flash into a battleground between Islamic State fighters and Iraqi special forces. When they reached the special forces lines, males were ordered to lift their shirts to prove they weren't suicide bombers. The father was so beside himself, so panicked. It was obvious because he had a short shirt on and was carrying a child that he wasn't Islamic State. I believe they will both be taken to a refugee camp. In conclusion, those 10 images are a number of the sector's maximum well-known and famous images. Each one has a thrilling tale that facilitates upload context and intensity to the photo. These memories offer a glimpse into exclusive cultures and historic moments and assist us higher apprehend the sector around us.